Hello, everyone. Mr. Lipchick here, and today our discussion is going to be on psychoanalytic theories of personality. When you talk about psychoanalysis, you can't really separate it from a discussion of Sigmund Freud, who was arguably the founder of it and the most significant contributor to it. Sigmund Freud had a profound influence on personality theory. He believed that a strong influence of the subconscious mind was prevalent in human development. His emphasis was very much on the subconscious. He believed that the unconscious mind is where all of our desires, drives, and motivations are, but that they're suppressed by the conscious mind. These are the forces that guide our interactions with others, according to Freud. And the unconscious is the part of the mind that we are not aware of. It doesn't come to the surface in our normal day to day life, but it is back there guiding what we do, which is a pretty interesting idea when you think about it. Freud held that the unconscious was the largest part of the mind, okay, kind of like the body of an iceberg underwater, as you see in the picture. The preconscious mind, according to Freud, contained memories that we can call into our conscious mind. And all parts of the mind are part of the psychodynamic perspective on personality. So he had a theory that pulled all of these elements together. And historically, he is a historical figure, and he impacted how human beings, view their own selves. He had an enormous impact on science and society. According to Freud, the personality is composed of three main structures: the id, ego, and superego. The id is the most primitive part of the mind and drives us to seek pleasure and avoid pain, like all other organisms in the world. The id is inborn and present at birth. And a person who is controlled by the id is a selfish, impulsive person. We might call them a babyish person. Okay, you see the id constantly in infants because they haven't developed their ego and superego, and they only know pain and pleasure, and they cry when they need something. The ego is the rational sense of self found in the conscious and unconscious minds. A weak ego creates difficulty balancing personal desires with societal expectations. There are always things that we want, and there are societal parameters within which we have to work. This is difficult for somebody with a weak ego. When there are conflicting demands on the ego feels threatened, and the person will experience anxiety or stress, however you want to phrase it. The superego is the sense of morality and conscience. It's your understanding of right from wrong that you've gotten from your parents or religious training or what have you. It is partly conscious and unconscious, and it is the social standard upon which a person acts. A person who is controlled by his or her superego would be rigid and moralistic. Okay, they would constantly be judging other people and their behavior, and would be very self-controlled. Okay, according to Freud, all these parts of the mind working together implement defense mechanisms in certain circumstances. Defense mechanisms are processes that the mind uses in order to keep from feeling anxiety for one's behaviors. One of them is called rationalization. This is when people distort the facts or make excuses for behavior in order to keep from feeling guilt. For example, a student cheats on his or her exam and tells himself, the other people cheated too, so it's really not a bad thing. Repression is a defense mechanism that occurs when a person blocks a memory, emotion, or idea that is threatening to them. They repress it, they push it back into the subconscious. Denial is when a person refuses to admit that something unpleasant has happened to his or herself in order to protect his or her self-image. Okay, so, something happens and often people are just in a state of denial. They just pretend it's not there. And there is displacement, and this is when a person directs his or her emotions towards people, things, or animals that are not the real object of their feeling. The boss yells at you at work and you come home and yell at your dog or something like that. Projection is when a person represses his or her own unacceptable or threatening feelings and places them onto another person. This is really at the heart of most of the criticisms that we face from other people. So you may want to not be too offended when somebody criticizes you, because it's very possible they're just projecting their own fears onto you. And there's reaction formation, and this is when an unpleasant feeling or idea is turned into the opposite, exaggerating feelings of love when anger at somebody is unacceptable. For instance, there might be a kid at home with an abusive parent, and they turn that feeling into loyalty for the parent and talk about how great the parent is and what a great provider they are, ignoring their emotional neglect or abuse from that person. There's also regression, and this is when somebody reverts back to an earlier stage of psychological development when they are experiencing anxiety. And there is sublimation, and this is channeling impulses away from the intended target into other activities such as relieving work-related stress by exercising. So you're at work, you're under a lot of stress, and you come home and you have a punching bag and you punch the punching bag. That would be sublimation. Okay, along with Freud came another individual, Carl Jung, or an early follower of Freud, who eventually broke with him for different reasons. Jung believed that in addition to a person's unconscious, everyone shares a collective unconscious. Okay, something we all have together. A collective unconscious is a psychic inheritance that contains universal symbols, memories, and images from human history. And the themes within this collective unconscious are known as archetypes. So when you hear the term archetype, you should immediately think of Jung. An archetype is a picture that symbolizes the unity of life, and the totality of self. Okay. Jung identified archetypes in legends and fairy tales, kind of like cultural themes that reappear. The prince coming and saving the day, the evil stepmother, those types of things. And, he was of German descent, and the Germans were very big on fairy tales. They have a long history of that. Jung believed that the most important archetypes are femaleness and maleness, which could be seen in both sexes. Okay, so according to Jung, no one is completely male or completely female in their behavior. They both had parts of these archetypes. Okay. According to Jung, the anima was the female archetype, which appeared in men, and the animus was the male archetype in women. He believed that when the sexes denied their anima or animus, it would cause illness. He also believed that people were motivated by their past conflicts in addition to their desires for fulfillment. Okay, then we have Alfred Adler. Like Freud, Adler believed that insight into the subconscious was key to treating mental illness. He disagreed, however, that insight involved conflict related to aggression and sex. Freud had a great emphasis on sex. Adler was not so much a supporter of that. Adler believed that emotional conflicts are related to self-perceptions of inferiority. Okay, he paid a great deal of attention to people's feelings of superiority and inferiority. Adler believed that striving for superiority is what drives human behavior. He held that people developed an unhealthy need to outdo or dominate others as a way of dressing their own feelings of inferiority, and they develop an inferiority complex as a result. Okay, so you've probably heard of inferiority complexes, and this is usually when people have deep-seated feelings of inferiority and they compensate by trying to be dominating and superior to others. Adler believed that the birth order affected personality development, where you fall in time of your birth relative to your siblings. He found consistent differences between firstborn and lastborn children. You might note that almost every president we've had and every astronaut has been a firstborn child. He found that firstborn children could be nurturing towards others, but were critical and had a need to be right all the time, being the oldest of the group. Middleborn children tended to be cooperative and motivated, but also tended to be competitive. And the lastborn children tended to be dependent on others for things that they needed rather than acquiring them for themselves, because the older kids would, guide them and show them things. He found that only children tended to have intense feelings of superiority, that these were really pronounced in children. Because as you grow older, a lot of these things you gain perspective on when you begin to realize your mortality and your limitations. Okay, that concludes our lesson. Thank you very much for attending, and I look forward to seeing you in the live lesson session. Have a great day. Bye-bye.